Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And this time, I would like to talk to you about Mars entering the zodiac sign of Libra on August 6th. But before I do, I would also like to invite you to join the Christopher Renstrom Astrology Salon, where subscribers receive an astrology lesson once a month, followed by a live, where we work on interpreting the chart of someone famous. That could either be a celebrity in the news or a famous person from history. We then end the live with a discussion of an upcoming transit of your choice. Now, let's go ahead and talk about Mars entering the zodiac sign of Libra on August 6th. Mars, the planet of gumption and drive, enters the zodiac sign of Libra on August 6th, where it will remain until September 22nd. Now, what does Mars do in an astrological chart? We all pretty much know that Mars was named after the Roman god of war, and we often expect Mars to bring some sort of conflict or strife into our life. Mars is associated with battles and with disputes and with arguments and with people losing their temper and getting all sorts of angry with one another. But that's not the only function that Mars plays in your astrological chart. Mars has a mission in your astrological chart, and that is to get you what you want. All right, if you're saying to yourself something like, I would really like this, I would really like that, I would really like to change this about myself, or I really feel like I deserve something and I'm going to fight for it. That's when Mars as an energy is summoned in your own astrological chart. It's the planet that's going to pursue what you want without interruption and without anything trying to stop it in its tracks. Now, the trick to working with Mars is that you need to be focused on what you want. It needs to be something that you truly do desire. That's when the best expression of Mars comes out. That's when Mars can champion. That's when Mars can advocate. That's when Mars can help you to be the best that you can be. But if you're iffy about what you want, if you're ambivalent about what you want, if you feel like you don't deserve what you want and you can't possibly have what you want, then Mars will turn around and get all sorts of frustrated and annoyed with you. Mars will say things like, buck up, or focus on what you want, or why shouldn't you want this? And if your response is something like, well, it's too selfish, or Beverly deserves this more than I do, or wanting something, I'm not a competitive person, I'm easygoing, and that's where Mars can become a bit of a tangle. That's where Mars can sort of get turned around and mixed up. Mars needs direction. If you say, I want to get that job, I want to win this foot race, I want to win the heart of Jeremy, okay, then Mars will go about getting you to win the heart of Jeremy, or to win the contest, or to be the best that you can possibly be. But what Mars also brings with it is a wonderful sense of good sportsmanship. Let's say you don't win the heart of Jeremy. Let's say you don't win the foot race. Let's say you didn't get exactly what you wanted. Mars doesn't throw up its hands and give up. Mars is like, okay, we didn't do so well that one time, And who knows, maybe Jeremy's a putz and you don't want anything to do with Jeremy. But let's go for it next time. Let's not be disheartened. Let's not lose our bravado. Let's work harder next time to achieve the things that you wanted to achieve. And let's figure out a way to do that. Maybe we need to train more for that foot race. Maybe we need to be choosing better people than Beverly and Jeremy. Or maybe we need to really sit down and learn how to win this particular contest or study the points of an argument. So there's always an element of self-improvement to Mars. It's not just sort of knocking people to one side or elbowing people out of your way just to go and get what you want. Mars can apply itself to the successful accomplishment or achievement of something that you set out to do. Now, Mars is going to be traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra. What we need to remember about the planets is that a planet never stops being a planet, no matter what zodiac sign it's traveling through. Mercury is always thinking. Venus is always beautifying. Mars is always striving to accomplish something. Saturn is always doubting. Anyway, a planet will never stop being a planet, no matter what zodiac sign it's traveling through, but it will take on the aspects or the color or the dimensions or the personality of that zodiac sign. Maybe a better way of putting that is it will take on the values of that particular zodiac sign. So when we're looking at Mars entering the zodiac sign of Libra, we need to ask ourselves, well, what's the zodiac sign of Libra like? All right, now we look at Libra and we see scales. We see the balance. We might be familiar with the scales from the figure of Justice standing outside of a courthouse holding the scales in her hand. Or we might be familiar with the scale from our bathroom scale that we step on first thing in the morning, where we might either be like, oh goodness, we lost those 3 pounds, yay! Or what am I doing with those extra 3 pounds on? The scale's lying. Basically, scales don't lie. And that's because scales are instruments. They are impartial. And that's the thing that makes the zodiac sign of Libra so singular. Of all the signs in the zodiac, which are creatures or animals, Libra is the only zodiac sign that is an instrument, all right? It's a device. It's not a person, and it's not a creature. It's scales. And what Libra stood for was civilization, basically, justice, rules and laws, things that govern over a society and make sure that everyone gets along with one another. I mean, we can all be like, I want peace and I want harmony and I want good things in life. And this is a wonderful way of approaching the world. But what's going to organize that harmony? What's going to insist on that justice? It's going to be the rules and laws as exemplified and symbolized by the zodiac sign of Libra. Libra is also the zodiac sign of relationships, okay? That's one person and another person coming together to form a relationship. Now, we tend to think of relationships as people sort of merging into one another, finding your soulmate or your partner, and we're going to merge together into one sort of person, or at least that's what we're feeling when we've fallen in love with someone, when we've lost ourselves in their lovely and beautiful gaze. But a relationship is made up of 3 parts, all right? Just like the scales. With the scales, you have one dish, another dish, and they are linked by a chain to a cross piece, which holds them as they try to find their balance. In a relationship, we also have these 3 parts. We have me, person A, we have you, person B, and then we have the relationship itself. So if you can imagine a relationship as the scales themselves, one person, another person, and they're linked by a cross beam, which is a relationship itself, then you begin to see how Librans see relationships. They don't see them as 2 people coming together to complete one whole. They see them as 2 people working together, living together, loving one another in the trust, in the covenant of a relationship. So if Mars is a planet that goes out and gets you what you want, and if Mars is a planet that's going to make you be the best that you can possibly be, so what is Mars in Libra going to do? Mars in Libra is going to do whatever it takes to make a relationship the best that it can be. But Mars is also a planet of enforcement. Okay, it's a planet that's going to back up its words. It's a planet that's going to back up its actions. So if Libra is the zodiac sign of peace and harmony, then Mars in Libra is going to be a peacekeeping Mars. It's going to be a Mars that ensures that no great conflict takes place or no great strife takes place, that the 2 sides, even if they're not talking to one another, find some way to get back into a dialogue with one another. Mars is a bridge-building Mars and not a bridge-burning one. But the great question that anyone who has Mars and Libra in their own zodiac chart is, what are you willing to do to keep the peace? And so when we have Mars transiting through the zodiac sign of Libra, that question is asked of all of us. What are you willing to do to keep the peace? And that question has 12 very different answers. And finally, Let's talk about Mars's planetary dignity in the zodiac sign of Libra. Mars in the zodiac sign of Libra is said to be in its detriment. Okay, that means it's struggling to be Mars in that zodiac sign. Why is Mars struggling to be Mars in the zodiac sign of Libra? The reason is because Libra is Venus ruled. It's in domicile, meaning at home in the zodiac signs that it rules. Mars is at home in the zodiac sign of Aries, and Mars is at home in the zodiac sign of Scorpio. But Mars is in detriment in the zodiac sign that is opposite Aries, just like it's in detriment in the zodiac sign that's opposite Scorpio. Those signs happen to be Libra and Taurus, the two zodiac signs that are ruled by Venus, named after the goddess of love, harmony, and peace. So Mars, named after the Roman god of war, doesn't feel very comfortable if he has to take up residence in the zodiac signs ruled by Venus, named after the goddess of peace and harmony. So, what is Mars in Libra like? What are some of the problems or the struggles that Mars in Libra is having? Well, one of them is that Mars in Libra is said to be confrontation averse. What is confrontation averse? That means you're against confrontation, okay, which is a Mars thing. Confrontation is something that Mars does. So here, Mars's energy of adversity is being turned against the very thing that it likes to do, which is confront, okay? So Mars in Libra is confrontation averse. It doesn't want to engage in any kind of confrontation. So people with Mars in Libra, for instance, might have a tendency to avoid confrontation. And they might avoid confrontation by leaving the room or ducking out if they see the person coming in that they have this sort of anger or frustration or feeling about them, and they feel like they need to confront them, and so they might like leave the room or go in the other direction or hide out behind a desk or a nearby friend. Someone else with Mars in Libra who's confrontation adverse might also minimize the scope of a problem. It's not that big a deal, or I'll take care of it, or this really isn't a problem at all. I'm sorry I even brought it up. That's also Mars in Libra being confrontation averse. Another way is by changing the subject. Maybe the topic of conversation has become too heated. People are starting to argue. And then, you might be the person who steps forward and says, like, how about going out and getting a salad or something like that, just sort of making up something that changes the subject altogether. Or what do you think about what happened to Betty? All right, it's just changing the subject to something different and taking the tension out of that confrontation or fight that's taking place in front of them. Another way of being confrontation averse with Mars and Libra is to placate others, is to make others feel better, to appease them, to make them feel all right, to apologize excessively for having rocked the boat or said something that got them upset, and to ask them what would make them happy. Maybe offer them a glass of wine or to sit down, or maybe even offer to leave. Maybe a person with Mars and Libra is like, I'm causing the trouble here, so I'm going to leave right now and not make any trouble. So placating or pleasing, bending the knee to others is something that's also very much connected to Mars in Libra. All of these are ways of avoiding a confrontation. And of course, the reason that all of this is taking place is because Libra is Venus ruled. But I want to throw out another idea here. Just because Libra is Venus ruled doesn't mean that Librans can't be commanding in their own sort of way. They can be very commanding, all right? They can be very this is what I would like to see happen. Now, they're not going to come out and say, this is what I would like to see happen, do it, like an Aries, or this is what I would like to see happen in order to scale new heights, like a Capricorn. What a Libra is going to do is really sort of present the idea of wouldn't this be a good thing if it happened, and if we work together by making it happen? Okay, that's Libra being diplomatic. Or let's say Libra's being strategic. It will figure out a way to persuade someone to do what it is that they want to do, or it will fall back on its law and order side. It will say, this is the rule, this is the law, this is the command. I didn't make it up, but this is what the rule or the law is, and I'm just bringing it up to you, or I'm the messenger, or I'm just enforcing it even. So Librans do have an ease with being in a position of authority. It's also a zodiac sign that happens to be very good at delegating authority. So what makes it so difficult when Mars is there? Remember, Mars is confrontation averse. Mars wants to confront, and adversity, which is Mars's nickname basically, has been turned against confrontation. So we have a Mars in Libra that's being uncomfortable. Not Libra, Libra's fine. It's the Mars in Libra that's being uncomfortable. And one of the things that creates the discomfort is a difference in values. Mars is very much like, that's what I want. I'm putting my needs, my desire, my pursuits first, and I'm going to go after it. Okay. And Mars is expecting you as a person to back them up. If Mars is the galloping horses on the chariot, you have to be the person now in the driver's seat and cracking the whip and driving that chariot. You have to have a firm grasp of the reins in order for Mars to do its job. When Mars is in detriment in a zodiac sign like Libra, Libra values we over me. So what Libra wants to do here is engage people, collaborate, coordinate, work with people to accomplish an end. And it wants to do it in partnership, two people working together, or even a group of people working together. So what happens here with Mars in Libra is that Mars in Libra has to learn to play nicely with others, okay? So the solution when you're working or living with Mars in Libra isn't to be more Marsy, okay? But to find a way to be Mars in a Libran fashion, okay? Some ideas would be a conversation instead of a confrontation. Another one might be talking about a problem candidly and collaboratively. How can we work together on this problem? How can we work together coming up with a solution? Rather than blaming the other person and saying, well, Phil, it's because you were asleep at the switch that we're, instead of doing that, saying, Phil, okay, it looks like we're in the middle of a situation and let's sit down and figure out what we can do to salvage the situation that we're facing right now. What kind of ideas do you have? I have an idea. That is collaborating, not throwing Phil over the side of the boat or under a bus, but working with Phil to figure out an answer or a solution. A third way of sort of redirecting confrontation adversity is owning rather than deflecting. Okay, so if your feeling is that you're owning who you are, you're owning your voice, you're owning your position rather than deflecting, that's a position of empowerment. Okay, you're not confronting someone, you're saying, that was my responsibility, or this is what I believe, or this is something that really matters to me. You're owning yourself, you're owning your values. And that also changes an energy in something which could be confrontational. And finally, another Libran approach is to use the power of persuasion instead of pleasing others. So in other words, instead of like, I'm sorry I did that, or I'm sorry I spoke out, or something like that, appeasement, okay, use persuasion. Okay, I hear you, hear that, we tried this and you didn't like the way that it turned out, but what if we tried a different way of doing this? What if we tried a different approach, or maybe even persuading the person? This is what I think we should do. You can shoot it down or not have anything to do with it if you want to. But, I think you're very clever and very smart and insightful. And I think that what's going to really sort of appeal to you about the solution or about this possibility might be going ahead and doing X, Y, and Z. Always remember that in Venus, whenever you're bringing in a Venus value into a conversation, persuasion, compliments, flattery, making the other person feel really good about themselves, recognizing that they're upset about something and offering to make them feel better in some sort of way, okay, with some kind of action or opportunity or alternative. The way that you can persuade, not argue a case, but persuade the person to come over to your side. In other words, anything that gets you out of an offensive, defensive rubric, and to bring two sides who are, butting heads with one another to come together in a different way, to recognize the things that they have in common rather than standing on their differences. Any way that you can do that is one of the great strengths and one of the great powers of Venus, and also one of the great strengths and powers of Libra, the zodiac sign that she rules. Now, if you're born under Aries, or you have Aries rising, this period of time when Mars is moving through your opposite sign of the zodiac, which is Libra, this is going to be a little rough for you. Not rough in a combative or confrontational way or something like that. Where it's going to be challenging for you is that you have to do what the other person wants. You have to follow their lead, except you're not sure that the other person knows what they're doing. That's the dilemma that you're going to find yourself in. Now, why is that the dilemma that you're going to find yourself in? You're born under Aries or you have Aries rising. That means Mars is your ruling planet. That means Mars is basically the planet who is giving you the prompts and the cues of what to do. Right now, with Mars in your opposite sign of Libra, as I said, you have to follow the other person's lead. That can be a partner, a collaborator, an associate, someone that you're partnered with in some kind of way. But what makes this even more so along those lines is that you have Saturn in your zodiac sign right now. Saturn is the planet of test trials and tribulations. And so what Saturn is doing is that Saturn has probably recently placed on your shoulders certain responsibilities or certain obligations that you are obliged to fulfill, and that might feel very heavy right now. It might be someone really needs you to do this for them, or you've been given a certain job or task which you might feel like you're out of your element. Or maybe you're just facing one obstacle after another obstacle in a never-ending obstacle course, all right? So you're feeling very burdened. You might also be feeling a bit unsure of where you're going with things, whether you're up to the task at hand, whether you can really shoulder these responsibilities. You might also be feeling a great deal of frustration, like this is keeping me from the things that I really want to be doing in life. And so you may feel partnered in some sort of association, relationship, or professional partnership with someone else. Now, that person has the lead. That person has the upper hand. Why? Because Mars in Libra, Mars is your ruling planet. That means Mars rules you. Okay, so you're the Aries and you've got Saturn in Aries, which might be making you feel stuck or frustrated or not in a position of strength that you want to be in. You know, you're overburdened or overwhelmed with things. And so Mars moves the energy on over to Libra, which is other people, so that it's other people who are unloading their responsibilities on you, or it's other people who need to take the lead. But because it's Mars in Libra and it can be perhaps conflict averse or avoiding situations where they need to take command, you may be feeling more and more of a rising tension of like, why am I saddled with this fool who doesn't know what they're doing? Or why am I saddled with this idiot who isn't taking the lead on this? If I were in that position, I would know what to do. But you're not in that position, not with Mars traveling through your opposite sign. So the way to work with this energy is basically to follow this other person's lead. All right. You may be feeling right away like there's nothing to follow, that this person shouldn't even be in this position of dominance over you. But A, you probably have no voice in the matter, no way to really challenge that type of situation. So you kind of like have to make the best of what you have. But there's also a B side to this idea. You may discover in following this person's lead that they're not so silly after all, that they actually kind of do know what they're doing. It's not the way you would have done it. You know, it's not the steps you would have taken, the action steps that you would have employed, but maybe their roundabout way of doing something has some wisdom to it. Maybe you see that by going ahead and following what it is that they are doing. So that's a very nice result that could come from following someone else's lead. Then again, you can have the flip of that. You may learn during this period that you are under someone else's command or someone else's authority. You may learn about all the things one shouldn't do, okay? People teach as much by example of what to do as they teach by the example of what not to do. And that can be a tremendous learning experience as well. But I think what I'm saying during this 6-week period that Mars is in Libra, you can't fight the fact that you have to follow someone else's lead. You might even have to do things according to their whim. But instead of being resentful and arms crossed and I know better about it, open your mind and you might end up learning a few things about a better way to improve the way that you improve situations, or maybe even a better way of how to exercise authority and power in your own life. If you're born under Taurus, or you have Taurus rising, Mars is moving through that part of your solar chart that is associated with the 6th house. This is a very strong statement because according to planetary joys, Mars is in its joy in the 6th house, the house of work and service and laboring. Now, typically, Mars in the 6th house is what I would refer to as a workaholic placement. This is someone who works very, very hard at what they do in life. They might be a high achiever, but the emphasis is actually more on the work and the laboring than it is on the accomplishment and the achieving because of the 6th house placement. Now, you may feel during this period of time that Mars is moving through the 6th house of your solar horoscope. You may feel like you're doing the work of 10 people, like you're doing the work of all the people in your department or division or in your household or in your life. And you are, if you keep on insisting on doing things your way. Okay. Taurus is a zodiac sign that's very industrious. Okay. Its image is the bull. And the bull is a magnificent creature, so magnificent that it was worshipped in ancient times for its power and for its fertility and its association with agriculture and the beginning of society and the beginning of money. That all goes back to the symbol of the bull. But when people are born under the zodiac sign of Taurus, they tend to be very hardworking. They tend to be beasts of burden, or there is a tendency to go in that direction. And they tend to want to do things their way. Their way is really the best way to do things. And if you keep on insisting on this right now, with Mars moving through a very people-oriented sign like Libra, then you're going to end up very frustrated and angry at people who aren't working as hard as you and who aren't asking to lend a hand. And the reason they're not working as hard as you is because you've put everything on your own shoulders and you're doing all the work. And because they're not asking if you need any help is probably because you're looking at them, gruffly or brusquely in some sort of way. You maybe stopped giving them responsibilities because they didn't do the job as well as you do. And you might have even told yourself that handing out work to others creates more work for you. Now, one of the ideas, which is a very Libran idea, and remember that Libra is ruled by the planet Venus just like you are ruled by the planet Venus. One of the ideas of Libra is less is more. All right. Libra is a big believer in quality over quantity. And when I'm using a phrase like less is more, is that you don't have to kill yourself to get something done. You don't have to present the whole thing all together. That with some editing and some repackaging and with some nipping and some tucking, the famous quote of Diana Vreeland, an editor of Vogue magazine, was, "Ladies, when leaving the house, look in the mirror before you leave the house and remove half the accessories you have on." Okay. And that was her way of saying you'll appear more streamlined, you'll appear more elegant. So this idea of less is more is very much a Libran value. And what goes sort of hand in hand with that sort of streamlining and also works with this idea of Mars in the zodiac sign of Libra is the beauty of Libra lies in Libra's appreciation of what others bring to the table. Okay. Libra loves to see what other people are going to bring to the table. We come together to celebrate or to decorate or to put on an event. And Libra wants to see what other people have to contribute. It's an air sign thing to be curious about what other people think or how other people see things. And so if you can get into that mindset of appreciating what other people bring to the table, appreciating that it's not the way you would have done things, it's not what you would have built or what you would have produced, you, might find another way of looking at things. Some of what you're seeing might even be much better than what you had in mind, and that would be delightful. But you can also see where other people are in their development, where other people are as an associate or in their learning of a trade or where they are in life. And you can look for ways to build on that. I mean, if you're, for instance, spearheading a project and you let other people bring what their ideas and their insights to the table, you can be informed by their different perspective, but you can also find ways to build on what it is that they have to contribute. And you build on that in those agricultural ways of cultivating talent and nurturing their growth. So instead of becoming someone who's isolated themselves with a job or a task, you're actually opening yourself up to a collective effort while teaching people how to maybe do a job better because you're more experienced or you've been in charge for a very, very long time. So not only does this give you an opportunity to teach people what you do, to share your gifts, your experience, and your skills, to mentor, you also have a chance or an opportunity to bring them up to speed. You also build trust so that when you delegate responsibilities, they're able to shoulder them and they're able to deliver. And this, in the end, allows you to get twice as much done for half the effort. If you're born under Gemini or you have Gemini rising, Mars moving through the zodiac sign of Libra is traditionally a romantic placement for you. And since summer is the season for romance, this could be what you're doing for the next 6 weeks that Mars is traveling through this zodiac sign. Now, what we also have to remember during this time that Mars is in Libra, Mars will also be opposite Saturn in the zodiac sign of Aries. So what does that mean? What it means is that Saturn in Aries, which is ruled by Mars moving through Libra, is bound to introduce all kinds of complications, things that get in your way, things that prevent you and the person that you're enamored with from getting together. But instead of feeling thwarted or frustrated, these obstacles to your union, to the two of you getting together, may be the very thing that fuels your interest all the more. It's like, oh, I can't be with this person. I shouldn't be with this person. Why shouldn't I be with this person? Why am I letting someone tell me what to do? Or what is it about this person that might be forbidden fruit? Or this obstacle makes this person really interesting. Okay, you're a Gemini. You love solving problems and you love basically plotting your course through what can be obstacles and difficulties and outwitting things that are thrown into your path, things that are meant to block your way. If something blocks your way, you don't obey it and say, oh, something's blocked my way. I better stop and go back the way I came. You're going to be like, well, why is that there? And why should I go back the way I came? And certainly I can figure out a way around this. Okay, so this is where Saturn, despite the roadblocks that it's throwing into your romantic life, is also fueling your interest in your paramour all along. Now, in the end, you may not get together in the long run. The obstacles might prove to be too insurmountable, or maybe you get to the person. You climb up Rapunzel's hair to the tower, and you're there with her or him. Maybe it's a dude with long hair. Okay, so you get together and you have a fun time, but you're kind of like, it was kind of more fun when the obstacles were in the path, or it was kind of more fun when we were trying to chart out these different things or whatever. So it may not come together because it might have been more about that obstacle course than being with the person. But nevertheless, this time together will remain as a memory and leave a lasting smile on your face. Now, for those of you Geminis or Gemini risings who aren't involved in a romance, this is a great time for bridge building. with Mars traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra. What it means is that people are in the mood to listen to what you have to say, as long as you adopt that famous Mars and Libra approach that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, which is Mars and Libra means you have to play nicely with others. This isn't about besting rivals or going against competitors or anything like that. It's actually working with people who might have been a rival or a competitor in a creative and a collaborative way. And so if you go ahead and do this, and maybe you are meeting people that in the past would have been challenges or they would have contested you in some way, maybe you're finding a camaraderie that exists between the two of you that transforms you from rival into comrade, with Mars forming a trine from the zodiac sign of Libra to your own sign of Gemini. This could be very collaborative, very creative in its collaboration. But if that's what's taking place, and that would be a wonderful thing that's taking place, make sure to share the spoils, even if you feel like you did most of the work. When you share the spoils, when you make sure that everyone gets a piece of the pie and that everyone is recognized, this will serve you better in the long run than trumpeting your own accomplishment. Trumpeting the accomplishments of others as well as yourself is not only a very classy sort of thing to do, it also ensures that they will always be in your corner in the future. Now, if you're born in the zodiac sign of Cancer, or you have Cancer rising, Mars will be traveling through the 4th house of your solar horoscope. And anytime that Mars travels through the 4th house of your solar horoscope, it typically brings with it family strife, or fights or difficulty with loved ones or people who live in your home. Now, during this period of time, which is 6 weeks of Mars traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra, you may find loved ones to be provocative, demanding, or even combative. All right. That's because they're being the Mars here. They're making demands. They want you to stop what you're doing and come help them out with a problem or rescue them from some kind of a situation. Now, it could be, because Mars is traveling through Libra, they could be doing this in a confrontationally averse way. Okay. I think the common term for that is maybe passive-aggressive way. But my feeling is that Mars is stirring up trouble and it's stirring up difficulty for you. What makes this perhaps even more problematic is that Mars is in opposition to Saturn in Aries, which is at the top of the solar horoscope for Cancer. And so this might be something in which demands at home are undermining accomplishments at work. Okay, they're getting in the way of the things that you need to accomplish at work, or you're feeling like your attention is being continually diverted towards home, and you've got these pressing responsibilities and obligations that you have to deliver on. So there's this kind of back and forth, this pendulum swing between the two planets in opposition. So what's the best thing to do with this placement, of loved ones being provocative and demanding and snippy, snarky? Okay, what you might want to do is actually take on the Mars and Libra approach to dealing with provocative, demanding, combative, snarky, and difficult people, is to let them do that. Okay, now, a lot of people are like, what? You're going to let that person get away with that? You're going to let that person walk all over you? You're going to let that person make those demands and be annoying like that? It's not letting them in that regard of like, oh yeah, no, it's cool. I'm fine with it. No, it's not letting them in that regard. What it is that Mars in Libra subscribes to the adage that if you give someone enough rope, they will wind up hanging themselves. Okay, so in other words, what this means is it requires you stepping out of the way and letting people who you're having a problem with, people who are making bad choices, people who are alienating support in their life or making things more difficult. What you want to do with Mars and Libra is just step out of the way and let them go ahead and do that. And if you let them go ahead and do that, then the people will end up becoming the author of their own downfall as a result of their bad choices or their destructive actions. It's like someone rushing at another person who's, standing on the edge of the cliff, and the person on the edge of the cliff steps out of the way last minute, and that person rushes off, into the oblivion. Okay, that's kind of a Mars in Libran approach. Now, this is something that, part of you might be like, oh, okay, I can see how it can apply to this person and that person. That's a good thing. But there's another part of you, Cancer, because you very much bond with the people in your life. This might not be an easy thing for you to do with certain loved ones or family members because you're born under Cancer, you have Cancer rising, you bond with these people. They can treat you miserably and be dreadful people. They're still family. Cancer risings are the ones that say, yeah, but they're still family, or they're my family. When everyone's like, build boundaries, distance yourself. Why do you have to take that? It's like, well, they're my family, and that for someone born under Cancer rising, that's something that's really very important. So it might be hard for you to let them be the agent of their own downfall. But if that's the case during this period of time, their own stumbling or their own downfall might be exactly what they need to do to turn themselves around in their life. Sometimes Cancers, because Cancer is such a parental sign, can get in the way of someone learning their own independence and learning their own self-sufficiency, because people born under Cancer have Cancer rising don't want to see them hurt and want to help out. So there might be a part of you that doesn't trust that that's the best way to do this sort of situation, to deal with these demands and difficulties, these challenges. But there's what can also be argued, and something to keep in mind is sometimes experience is the best teacher. That, letting someone fall on their face or end up in a difficult place because of bad decisions might be the best way of teaching them not to go down that particular road. Now, the flip side of this is that you could be dealing with demands and provocations being made from people in your family that you're sick and tired of, and you just don't believe it's going to happen. You don't believe that if you stepped out of the way that their bad choices would lead to that kind of an end or that kind of a realization. In other words, you don't believe that that evil stepmother or that ne'er-do-well brother will get their comeuppance or reap their just deserts. What you want to remember in a time like this is not to return fire with fire when you have Mars in Libra. What you want to remember here is that Libra is a zodiac sign of justice, and justice is visited on everyone, no matter how long it takes. If you're born under Leo, or you have Leo rising, Mars in Libra over the next 6 weeks is going to be a wonderful time for you. Mars in Libra is here to teach you the value of coordinating efforts with other people instead of flying solo. Now, as a Leo, you might say, well, I'm all into that. I love people, I like to think of myself as a people person. I'm very likable, I'm very chummy, I'm easy to get along with, and that's great. And it's pretty much true of Leo. But what I was introducing the idea of here is coordinating efforts with other people, okay? When you coordinate efforts with other people, like working as part of a team, that requires really a conscious decision and choice. It's not to blend into the background or to lower the volume on your glory or anything along those lines, but to look to other people as other people are looking to you to achieve a goal. It's kind of like basketball or any of those sports where people dribble or throw the ball or something like that with one another. And they're doing it in order to advance their interests down the court and to, sort of set it up for that person to kick the ball into the goal or to make the basket. Sometimes it's done by the star player, but sometimes it's done by the backups to the star player or done by someone else on the team. So coordinating efforts means sort of stepping down from the star position. Now, that doesn't mean like you're stepping down from your pedestal or anything like that, but it's stepping down from the star position, from the, only I can do it position, and working with others to achieve a common goal. Sometimes Leos don't always get this because Leo, your ruling planet is the sun. You bring the heat, you bring the light, you bring the day, just like the sun does. And when you depart, there goes the heat, there goes the light, and there goes the day. All right. So people pretty much look to you to bring that energy anyway. And what you do is you show up. You're a Leo. That's what you do. But when you're coordinating efforts with other people, that requires really listening to what they have to say, listening to their input and taking it in. It also means following their lead. And more importantly, it also means sharing the credit. Essentially, it's what I've been describing all along. It's teamwork, where you're helping someone else to succeed just as much as they're helping you. It's something that you can definitely get into because Mars in Libra forms a sextile to your zodiac sign. It forms a sextile to Leo, and something that can also help you to sort of keep your focus on the other people that you're working with rather than what your role is, which is to be star leader. Something that can help you to keep your focus is to use the word we in conversation instead of me. This reminds you that you're working together as a group, and that it reminds other people that you're not going to take the lead as much, that you're going to be turning to them, looking to them to help out with an assist over the next 6 weeks. And you will be doing this to the benefit of everyone who is involved in this particular endeavor. If you're born under Virgo, or you have Virgo rising, during this period of time that Mars is moving through the zodiac sign of Libra, this is a time for you to make peace with the choice that you're making. Now, Libra is a zodiac sign that's famous for vacillating. It's like the scales in the balance. They go up and down in order to arrive at the right balance, to arrive at the right decision, the right judgment. Okay. But Libras are famous for not knowing their mind, for going back and forth on a decision. And even when a Libra goes ahead and does wind up saying yes, that yes is usually conditional. It's not just a free and open and a committed yes. In fact, there's something vaguely still non-committal about any sort of yes or any sort of agreement that a Libra makes. A great Libran phrase is, I said maybe, and that's final. All right, it's something that drives people crazy. It drives people nuts. Now, as a Virgo or a Virgo rising, you tend to be more decisive. And that's because your thinking is it's better to be in than out when it comes to a situation. And the reason for that is that at least if you're in the door, you're in the situation, you've signed on for a project or endeavor, you can figure out how to deal with the consequences as you go along, how to deal with the consequences later on. That's because Virgos are geniuses at how to make a challenging situation work. I dare say it's even part of the appeal of a challenging situation for you. One might even say that it's the genesis of your creativity, being forced to improvise, to come up with solutions, and if one solution doesn't work, to backtrack very quickly and come up with a different one. However, what this can lead to in the end is a lot of decisions that maybe shouldn't have been made in the first place. And this is what you will be struggling with over the next 6.5 weeks that Mars is traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra. So what I want to introduce to you is this idea that perhaps a little more Libran back and forth, perhaps a little more Libran vacillation, perhaps a little bit more Libran weighing in the balance instead of analysis, which is what Virgos are so expert at, a little bit more weighing your options, a little bit more listening to the other person's side of the story so that you come up with the right judgment. That might not be the worst thing right now. One of Libra's great strengths, and when we're talking about Mars and Libra, we're talking also about the strength of Libra. One of Libra's great strengths is polling people and asking them about their input. And that might bring certain things that you overlooked out into the open, or it might bring certain anxieties or doubts that you pushed out of the way and might bring them back to the forefront for a new and fresh examination. Things that are worthy of greater consideration, especially when you find yourself on the brink of making such an important decision as the one you face now. If you're born under Libra, or you have Libra rising, then you probably already know that Venus is the planet of peace in astrology. And as your ruling planet, Venus often puts you into situations where it's up to you to bring light rather than heat to a dispute, and to get two warring parties to put down their grudges and to form a truce. But making peace and keeping the peace are two separate issues, and that's something that Mars in Libra can actually help you out with. Mars in Libra is certainly going to make you more assertive, braver, and resolute, especially in your convictions of what the right thing is to do. This is something that you will need in order to get to where you want to go. You've undergone a lot of changes over the past 2 years, chiefly because of the eclipses that have been taking place in the zodiac signs of Aries and Libra. And there are more changes to come, with the realignment of the modern planets especially. But where past changes were about you becoming more independent, the Mars in Libra changes are about you taking the hill and planting the flag. But this doesn't mean that you'll be turning into an Aries. What it means is taking the lead in your relationships and not being so quick to pass over the reins to someone else. What you've probably learned about yourself recently is that you're a lot more certain than you give yourself credit to being. What you've probably learned about yourself recently also is that if you always put yourself in the passenger seat, you might not like the person who's driving the car, and that you're the one who's better off behind the wheel. When I talk about not being so quick to pass over the reins and taking the lead in your relationship, this isn't something that you have to announce to everybody in the room. You don't have to say, "For now on, I will be taking the lead in this relationship," or "I want those reins back and give them back, Hank." Okay, no, that's not something you're going to be doing. What I'm saying is that you don't have to explain this choice. You don't have to explain this assertion, this conviction to partners or to loved ones or to friends. It's as simple as the action of not passing over the reins, of letting the reins stay in your hands. And you don't have to represent that disagreeably. You don't have to say, "Well, it's my turn now, and we're going to do things my way." You don't have to do any of that. Just simply envision yourself holding the reins in your hand, or the steering wheel in your hands on the steering wheel. Do this, express from this place, and people will listen and follow your lead naturally. Do this, and there will also be a lot less squabbling in your life. What it gets down to in the end, if you're a Libra or a Libra rising, is that the only person who has to believe in the authority you exercise is you. If you're born under Scorpio, or you have Scorpio rising, this period of time when Mars is traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra may be a very difficult one for you. Now, why am I saying that it's going to be a very difficult one for you? It's not so much that difficult things are going to be happening to you, like bad things or disasters or people challenging you or something along those lines. No, what I see with Mars traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra is that the difficulty is with yourself. And that's because Mars, which is your ruling planet, by the way, is traveling through a very sensitive angle of your horoscope. It's the angle that has to do with self-undoing, sometimes even described as self-sabotaging patterns. So what this angle also rules over is known as the 12th house in astrology. It's also the part of the solar chart that can be connected to the idea of depression and also incarceration. Now, obviously, I don't mean literal incarceration, but it's incarceration by a sense that you feel arrested in some way. Maybe it's stuck in a rut. Maybe it's stuck with certain circumstances in which there's no way out, that you feel trapped or that you feel cornered. And so over the next 6.5 weeks, you may feel yourself battling with bouts of depression and or helplessness these days. And this is pretty much indicative of Mars traveling through this angle of your particular solar horoscope. So I have two ideas that I want to share with you. The first one is owning your decisions, all right? Libra is a zodiac sign that's very much about decisions. Actually, Libra is famous for not making up its mind, for not making a decision or coming to a decision that leaves people very dissatisfied. And if you think of verdicts in most courtrooms have that effect on people. The reason for it is that, or at least the vacillation, is that Libra is symbolized as the scales in the zodiac. And you put something in one scale and something else in the other scale, and they go up and down until they find their balance, okay? Their balance isn't like they found their balance and they're at peace with one another. No, the balance is what renders the verdict, what renders the judgment. If, for instance, let's say you were putting weights in one dish and an object in the other, they go up and down, it's to determine the value of that object. Or like in a courtroom, going back and forth where a jury argues amongst themselves and goes over the information, they're trying to figure out what the best verdict would be. Okay, so Libra ultimately is very decisive, and it's because Libra is so decisive that it puts a lot of thought into making up its mind. So what you may be feeling right now with Mars traveling through Libra is maybe regret about choices you made, or maybe there are certain choices that have led you to feeling trapped or cornered, or that you might be very angry at yourself for making these choices, or you might even be very angry at yourself for not having made certain choices. Okay, there are the choices that are made that are just as important as the choices that are not made. And this might be something that's going on with you right now. What I would strongly counsel is to lighten up on the self-recrimination, getting down on yourself or punishing yourself for choices made or choices not made. This is something that Scorpios can tend to do, and it gets in the way of you being able to summon your clear thinking and your own powers of conviction and direction. There can be a lot of self-anger that can be involved with a Mars-ruled sign. Aries suffers from it all the time, and Scorpio suffers from it all the time. So what I would advise is to invest less energy in raking yourself over the coals. And it's not a bad thing to do that. It's actually a healthy and a loving thing to do. You may discover over the next 6.5 weeks that these choices might not have been mistakes at all, that they might have been choices that were still unfolding, that they were yet to bear results that you've yet to see, which would also be the story of your next 6.5 weeks. So I'm kind of saying, own your choices. Say, okay, that's the choice I made, or that's the choice I didn't make, and I'm taking responsibility for that. I'm going to live with the consequences. The consequences are such that you don't have to add, rubbing salt into your wounds in addition to that. The other thing that you might want to focus on is the energy and the power of Libra, the astrological sign itself. Libra is ruled by Venus, and one of the great strengths of Venus-ruled Libra is to exhibit grace under pressure. That's one of the best things that Libras can do. Everyone else can be screaming and yelling or whatever, and Libra can come across as very centered in those moments, and that there's a feeling of grace there. And it gets other people to who are shouting at one another to look over at the Libra and be like, well, maybe they know something we don't, or maybe they're more centered than we are with this. Or maybe even to simply feel a sense of peace of being in the presence of someone who is exhibiting grace under pressure. Maintaining decorum in an unruly situation expresses authority, and it earns people's respect. The other thing to trust in over the next 6.5 weeks is looking for the rule or looking for the law. Remember, Libra is the zodiac sign of rules and laws. This is going to get you a lot further in whatever cause you might be fighting for than railing against the system. Libra is a very system-oriented zodiac sign, whether it's the system of governing rules and powers that we live under, or whether it's the system of governing rules and powers that we should be living under, the ideal, what we pursue to be the best in terms of a system of living, the idealized life. So Libra, if you find the rule or law that supports your case or your cause, that will get you further than, saying you got cheated or, everything is set against you. The last idea that I want to share with you during this period of time, when you might be feeling more like withdrawing or isolating, or you might even be feeling despairing, is to remember that an air sign's greatest resources, and Libra is an air sign, are their human resources. And that by standing up for, or standing by, or standing with others, this gives you the strength, the fortitude, and the resolve that you've been searching for. If you're born under Sagittarius, or you have Sagittarius rising, you may have discovered recently that there are two types of people who are in your life right now. They're the ones who really believe in the new path that you're traveling, and there are the ones who don't. Now, it looks like you're in the process of stepping up to the plate, for lack of another way of putting it, taking command of your life, taking command of a new direction that you're heading in, but you're still feeling shy about it, all right? And sometimes when you resolve to live a certain way or to pursue a certain course, you're kind of looking around for people who are going to support you in this endeavor. And you're also looking at people who may be looking at you with sort of doubt and askance, like, really? You really think that you're going to do that? Now, sometimes the people who are the hardest to sell on the new you are the people you see every day, or the people who know you really, really well. Let's say you come dressed to work very differently, maybe very fashionable and chic, or very dressed up in some sort of way, or more professional than the way that you usually dress. Your workmates might make fun of it, and say, well, what are you doing? Are you, kissing up to the boss? Or, are you trying to stand out in some sort of way? And they might laugh at you or joke with you and say, take off that silly outfit that you've got on, or something along those lines. It's kind of like even, I don't know, going on a diet. You go out with friends and you order, certain things on the menu, and they're like, oh, when did you start ordering that? And they make fun of you. Or maybe you're giving up drinking and they're like, hey, drink this. It's not going to be bad for you. Let's do this. So there's a kind of group think. There's a way of traveling with a peer group that can sort of keep you in a particular role. And being a Sagittarius, a mutable sign, you're always very keen about that. You're going to do what you feel like doing anyway. But as a fire sign, you're kind of always looking to the audience at the same time. And if people are scowling or not on board with it or something like that, that performer side of fire signs would be like, oh, well, maybe I'll just step back into line or something along those lines. So what's happening here with the Mars in Libra is that the Mars in Libra is getting you to go in that new direction, to commit to that new direction. If you're staying longer hours to improve yourself, if you're changing your diet, if you're giving up drinking, if you're dressing a certain way because that's the way you want to present. In the past where you might have been a little bit embarrassed or whatever, the Mars in Libra is getting you to commit to that, to commit to, it's more than making a statement, to commit to that path. Because recently you've caught the eyes and the attention of people who think you can be better than you are right now. And they want to see you accomplish that. They want to see you achieve that. And that's great. You can stay longer hours to be coached or shown or tutored or something along those lines, but they can't do the standing up to the peer group that you have to do on your own. Because in the end, you're the one who has to believe in yourself, because other people can't do the believing for you. If you're going to take a new course, or if you're going to travel a new path, you need to be in your corner. You need to believe in yourself, because you are going to fall flat on your face. in the future. You are going to not achieve as much as you wanted to achieve. You need to be in your own corner because you need to be the person who tells yourself to pick yourself up off the ground, to brush off the dirt, and to climb back up on that horse that threw you. So what this is really about with the Mars in Libra, with the sort of jibing and the poking and the mockery and things like that, what this really is about is getting you to take on the mantle of believing in yourself. And once you do that more actively and more regularly and with great commitment, you're going to see the changes that you've been wanting to see. If you're born into Capricorn, or you have Capricorn rising, this period of time when Mars is traveling through the zodiac sign of Libra may present you with some unflattering truths, but they're truths that you should know anyway. Let's get to the first one right off the bat. Capricorns don't partner easily. Now, I'm not saying that this is exclusive to romantic relationships. This can happen in professional relationships, any sort of collaboration that you're involved in. It can also happen in your interactions with people in your life, according to how close or distant they are to you. Now, as a Capricorn, you're used to going off and taking care of things on your own. Let's say you've been given a job to do or a task to perform, a responsibility to fulfill. You will go off and you will take care of it. You will do the work, you will fulfill the responsibility, you will do what your contribution is to a greater project or endeavor, and you will reappear when the work has been done. Okay, so it's kind of like, imagine kids in a classroom. Everyone's given a homework assignment, and maybe they're told to work on it in groups, and they sit down and they work in groups. As a Capricorn, your natural inclination would be to go and leave, find a quiet place where you can work out the problems on your own and come back and present it to everyone as a fait accompli or a done deal. Capricorns are self-reliant and automatically accept that everyone's going to be relying on them as well. Capricorn really believes themselves to be the most dependable person in the room. But when you've got Mars going through the zodiac sign of Libra, and Libra is the zodiac sign of partnership, whether it's romantic, professional, or just your partner in a bridge game, okay? You're partnered with someone opposite on the table. Mars in Libra challenges you to put more we in your me, all right? In other words, it challenges you to see all relationships, all associations as partnerships. And this is going to require from you a more Libran approach. The first Libran approach that I would recommend to you to employ is to listen to rather than listen for. Libra is perhaps the best at listening when it comes to astrology. They have a sort of interview style, but it's not a interview grilling style. What's your resume and where were you between these years? And, it's not like a witness on the witness stand style of interviewing that Librans have. Librans have a way of asking leading questions about someone. And the person, listening to the question might almost think that it's a silly question, and they respond to it in a way that's sort of upfront and candid. And Libra will follow it with another leading question and another until the person gets really used to the idea of talking to the Libra, of conversing, feels like they can divulge and share information. This is why so many people born under Libra or who have Libra rising make great therapists, or they make great consultants. They're really expert at getting people to really talk about themselves and to reveal. But one of the things that Librans have perfected is the art of listening to rather than for. And what I mean by that is that they are listening to the other person. Okay. When the other person is talking, they are intent. They are hearing all the words and following and tracking the conversation, the story, the narration that the person is sharing. They're not listening for. A lot of times people listen for their turn to talk. Okay. Let's say they're having a conversation or an argument or a negotiation. They're going, yes, yes, yes. They're pretending that they're listening. They're nodding. They're maybe even repeating some of the things that the other person is saying. There may be even repeating back some of the words that the person has used. But as soon as you can sense your opening, your turn to talk, you will go ahead and you will launch all the things that you have to say. And that, unfortunately, is the way that a lot of people communicate nowadays. We can learn a lot by following the Libra example, which is to listen to the other person. This is something that may be coming up in different negotiations or conversations or collaborations over the next 6.5 weeks that Mars is moving through the zodiac sign of Libra. The other thing that you might want to draw from the Libra's playbook is the art of saying yes without committing to anything. Okay. Librans are masterful at this. They can come across as very agreeable, very intent. They're very careful listeners, as I said, and they're agreeing. They're giving the impression that they're saying yes, but they never end up saying yes or committing full on. There's always something slightly conditional about the way that a Libra will commit to something, but there are these certain conditions that might go against that commitment or condition that particular commitment. This is a good idea for you, Capricorn, during this period of time, because you have a tendency to commit, and to make yourself serve that commitment. And that's because Capricorns are all about responsibility, tasks, taking on the tests, trials, and tribulations. Capricorn is also very much a zodiac sign that knows its mind. Even if its mind is full of doubt, it will say, I doubt that we can do this. It knows its mind. It will sort of announce these pronouncements. And so the idea of learning to say yes without committing, to listening, to keeping your options open, this is a wonderful thing that you can learn from Libra while Mars is traveling through the zodiac sign. The other thing that's going to be going on during this period of time that Mars is moving through Libra is you making partnerships a priority, you making other people a priority. Even if you only know one person in your life, okay, you making that person a priority, even if that person is the mailman or the dry cleaner, making that person a priority. Because when you do that, you start getting another person's point of view. You start getting another perspective. You have concern for another person's life or background or where they're going. You have curiosity about others. Capricorn can sometimes get so focused on the dark angel that they're grappling with, the responsibility they've taken on, or the obligation, or the task, or the test, or the trial, or the tribulation, that they miss out that there are other people involved in this. There are other people involved in your life. There are other people who care about you. There are other people who are going to contest you or challenge you on things. There are other people who have something to contribute. Not everyone is out to thwart, undermine, or upset. So Capricorn, when you engage in making partnership a priority, which is a step more than making other people a priority, when you engage in making a partnership a priority, this idea that we're in it together, when someone comes to you with a problem, it's not going to be about you solving their problem. That can play into the Capricorn reliability factor that's going on. Like, of course, I can solve your problem, and going away and leaving and solving the problem, coming back and giving it back to the person. No, what I really want you to embrace is this sense of collaboration and of partnership, and that a problem isn't something for you to solve by yourself. A problem is something you can solve with someone through discussion, maybe even a fight. A lot of times fights can bring out opportunities for people to get so frustrated, annoyed, and angry at themselves that they reveal what the thing is that they were upset with, and that can actually turn from a confrontation to a conversation. It can even give the opportunity of collaborating on something. So if you can start to see yourself over the next 6.5 weeks as partnering with people, collaborating with people, that means a shared burden. That means asking them what they think. That means listening to their input. That means that if an opportunity arises, not saying yes right away or no right away, but keeping the conversation going so you can have more conversations with that person. You can see how an idea is developing. You can see where an opportunity might go. You might say right away, this isn't an opportunity, it's beneath me, I'm not going to go for it. Or part of you might be like, well, let's see what happens. I mean, there might be something to this. There might be something positive or different approach that I never considered before. Being open-minded is very Libran, and Mars in Libra can indeed stand for that sort of open-mindedness. But what we're really about here is the idea of working with people in collaboration. When you collaborate with other people, what happens is that everyone, including you, benefits in the end. If you're born under Aquarius or you're Aquarius rising, you're feeling very futuristic these days and like you want to get started with the next phase of your life. You can see your future out there in front of you. You could see the way that things are coming together, the things that are yet to be realized, and you're really excited. You're really turned on by, motivated by future prospects and possibilities. Now, because Mars in Libra is forming an opposition to Saturn, which is in the zodiac sign of Aries, what that means is that you might find that your present circumstances aren't particularly conducive to where you see things going. You may find that people aren't on board, that they're challenging things, that they're holding back on things, that you have these continual nagging obligations or responsibilities or problems or obstacles being thrown in your path no matter where you turn. You know, there's always something that shows up. It's a bill that needs to be paid, someone who needs to be tended to, something you have to take care of right away. And it's getting in the way of this future vision that you have of yourself. It's slowing down your momentum. It's taking you off course, and you don't want to be taken off course. Now, what's fascinating about this opposition, and it's an opposition between Mars in Libra and Saturn in Aries, is that Saturn is your ruling planet. You have two ruling planets. You have Saturn, which is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, and Uranus, which is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So where Mars in Libra is trining your sign, which is Aquarius, and what I mean by trine is that Libra is an air sign, just like Aquarius is an air sign. Two signs, two separate signs that share the like element are in trine. They're in harmony with one another. They're going to unconditionally support one another. Mars in Libra, because it trines your Aquarius, turns from a challenging or a combative Mars to one that's like, hey, let's go after this. You know, as I said earlier in the broadcast, Mars just wants to be pointed in the direction that you want to go, of something that you want. If you want something or you want to make something happen, Mars is like, yeah, right, let's make it happen. And particularly in a trine, it's going to be very excited about that. It's going to give you the energy and the verve, the gumption, the drive, and the motivation. But here your ruling planet Saturn is in the zodiac sign of Aries. Now, with an opposition, there's a natural split between the two signs. The two signs don't have anything in common, and they don't see any reason why they have to work together. My favorite example of that these days of an opposition are the Republicans and Democrats in Congress. They just have nothing to do with one another. They're not going to help one another out. And so we pendulum swing between the two extremes or the two parties that come into dominance. That's what can happen with a polarized opposition that can take place with planets that are 180 degrees away from one another. What's fascinating, though, about this is that you can't afford to ignore the Saturn in Aries, okay? The Saturn in Aries is ruled by the Mars in Libra. Mars rules the zodiac sign of Aries. So Mars rules any planet that's in Aries right now. And so that Saturn energy follows the Mars wherever it's going to go. Kind of like toilet paper on the back of your shoe. When you've exited the restroom and you're entering into the restaurant and you've got a little toilet paper thing that's traveling under your shoe underneath. Okay, don't pretend like it's never happened to you. Anyway, so it follows you around, sort of thing. And so these obstacles, these inconveniences, these detours and delays follow you around, and they can be very annoying. What you can do with that energy is that instead of trying to ignore it or bypass it, you can work with the energy The famous Jewish philosopher Walter Benjamin once said of Saturn, "I was born under Saturn. I was born under the planet of detours and delays." And in Walter Benjamin's life, those detours and delays thwarted him on a constant basis. But at the same time, they made him think in ways that he would never have thought on his own. They made him discover things that he wouldn't have discovered on his own. A lot of times when we set out for a preset destination, and this happens a lot when we're envisioning the future and all the possibilities, we want to go forward. We don't think of a detour or delay as being particularly enlightening or informative, but they can be. If you don't get the result that you wanted, this actually increases your resourcefulness and your problem-solving skills. Or if you've reached a dead end in one particular avenue, instead of throwing up your hands and giving up, you might go and look for a route that you weren't considering before, but is now available and may lead you in a different direction. So I think what I'm trying to say, a way that the Saturn and Aries energy can work with the Mars and Libra energy, is be less, I have to keep things on track in my thinking, and more, I wonder where this is going. I wonder where this might take me. Be less, someone who's got an objective and they're going to get to their directive right away, and a little more Alice in Wonderland in your journeying and your wandering. Because when you're open to different possibilities and when you enter into a sense of wonder, particularly when you're planning out a future vision of yours, having that sense of wonder or even enchantment, you could find a path of discovery in all of those missteps you've been taking. If you're born under Pisces or you have Pisces rising, you may experience a situation in which the person you were beholden to turns on you or leaves you high and dry. Okay, it's something in which you might have been dependent or reliant on someone to show up or to be there, or maybe it was someone you were paying rent to, or maybe it was someone that you were working for. You were beholden in some way. You're not equals. And suddenly this person's attitude towards you has taken an abrupt change. Maybe they've ended the relationship, or they're talking about ending the relationship, or perhaps things have just become more imbalanced or more unruly. Now, your first reaction normally would be like, oh my goodness, I have to get out of this situation, or, I have to leave. This person has become villainous or difficult or malicious in some sort of way. This person has broken a pledge. This person has reneged on a promise. That would be, I think, almost anyone's reaction to someone suddenly that you thought was on your side, even though you knew things weren't equal, but you felt like they were supportive, becoming unsupportive, either actively unsupportive or withdrawing that support. That's a pretty natural human reaction. But what you might want to do is dig a little deeper with what's going on with this person before you label them villain, okay? In other words, there may be certain financial troubles that are going on in this person's life that has forced their hand with you. If people have to lay off a lot of people in an organization, for instance, that can be due to financial trouble, that they're trying to keep the company or the interest aloft. And again, we can react very personally. Why wouldn't we? We've been working for them. But perhaps to take a step back and maybe ask ourselves, maybe they're going through hard financial times. Maybe there's a reason that the deal didn't come through. Maybe there's a reason why the contract was broken or a severance is taking place. That these things are happening, but it's not to, grind you down under its heel. It's because they're dealing with an area of distress. So this might be something that might allow you to take the feeling of rejection out of what's going on during this period of time that Mars is traveling through Libra. I remember as a kid, people used to say whenever, you faced rejection, don't take it personally, and I always found that to be a rather marvelous concept of like, how do you not take a rejection personally? It's like, it's a rejection to your person. You take it personally. But what I've learned over the years is that not to take it personally is actually sort of about taking a bird's eye view of the circumstances that are going on. You feel rejected or hurt, but there might be outside circumstances that are participating in this or creating this situation. And that kind of, as I said before, it allows you to take yourself off the hook. You don't have to say, I'm being rejected as a person. You can say, this other party is going through a rough time, or there's certain pressures. They're being forced to make these decisions or to act in this kind of a way. So there's a nice element to that. You don't feel like you're being flattened or rejected or dismissed in some sort of way. If you've been involved in a very imbalanced, and we're always talking about balances and imbalances with Libra, if you've been involved in a very imbalanced situation or an oppressive situation, this Mars going through Libra may be wonderful. It may be liberating you. You may be like, free, I'm ready to go. But you also might not feel quite ready to take the next step. Lots of people can be liberated from a situation, have prayed for liberation from a situation, find themselves thrown on their own devices and not knowing really what to do next because they were so used to that feeling of being beholden or stuck in a rut or something along those lines. Another thing to keep in mind, if this is happening in a more intimate relationship, maybe with a spouse or a loved one or someone that you're doing business with, another thing you might want to keep in mind is taking that Mars and Libra energy and reaching out instead of recoiling. In other words, having the bravery and the courage to raise the touchy subject, to say, is there something that's going on? And that could be financially, or maybe that's even emotionally, to reach out to the person and to see where that person is. And what you might find is that the person might actually open up to you. Maybe they were even trying to protect you from an unruly situation. And so finding the courage and the fortitude to reach out to this person during this period of time might not only bring about information. This person might say, well, this has been going on for a while, or I didn't know how to talk to you about this, or I really had hoped to shield you from this. Okay. And so this might be a wonderful opportunity to share information, to divulge information, but it might also change the balance of power between the two of you. You might find, like, now that this person's going through a difficult time, that you might find ways to work together, maybe ways to bridge the gap, to work through your differences. Or you simply might find a way of being a friend or a comrade to this person. And that might also be a really nice way to go with this Mars and Libra energy that's taking place. And maybe you can help this person. Maybe you've got advice, or maybe you've got support, or maybe you just have a really lovely conversation. Or, as I said, if it's a more intimate association or relationship, maybe this person opens up in a way that they never opened up to you before. And that might change the nature of your relationship. And if it isn't of that character, if you reach out and you have a good talk, but the problems are still there and there's still going to be a separation of the ways between you and this other person, at the very least, you can find ways to end things on a good note, on an up note. And Venus is a big believer that people should part company in the same way that they came together. If having things in common and good feelings towards one another brought you together in the first place, then maybe parting company in that same sentiment, with those good feelings and those shared interests, is also a wonderful way to say goodbye. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.